The cathedral stood majestically, filled with wealthy guests in designer suits and glittering jewelry, but the bride, in her immaculate white dress, her mascara running down her face, fled the altar. Cruel laughter echoed through the halls. A pitiful flight from wealth. On the church steps, a man in a threadbare work shirt held his young daughter's hand. They both froze as the bride collapsed before them, sobbing uncontrollably. Without hesitation, he removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the mocking glances. "It's okay," he whispered softly. "Just breathe." He had no idea she was the heiress to a billion-dollar empire. Meet Jack Turner, 36. Calloused hands that tell stories of honest toil. Every morning at 5 a.m., he's already under the hood of someone's broken-down car. Grease under his fingernails, sweat on his brow. The other mechanics call him a miracle worker. If Jack can't fix it, the car goes to the junkyard. But Jack's real work doesn't end when the garage closes. It begins when he picks up 8-year-old Ellie from school. Her pigtails bounce as she runs toward him, her fingers stained with paint and a smile brighter than any diamond. "Daddy, look what I drew today," she says, showing him another masterpiece. A little man in blue overalls with a cape billowing behind him. "You're the one saving cars, like a superhero." Jack's heart melts every time. 3 years ago, when cancer took Ellie's mother, Sarah, it felt like the world was falling apart. In her final moments, Sarah pressed something into his palm, a faded handkerchief, soft from years of use. "Promise me," she whispered, "you'll always be the good man I fell in love with." That handkerchief never left his pocket. Now it had become his anchor through sleepless nights, through unpaid bills, and through the crushing loneliness that comes when everyone else's lights go out. Today was supposed to be simple. Pick up Ellie from art class, maybe get ice cream if the tip was good. This week, they were walking past St. Catherine's Cathedral, Ellie jumping next to him, when chaos erupted. "Daddy, or why is it beautiful?" A woman was crying. Ellie tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward the cathedral steps. Jack followed her gaze and saw something that made his heart clench. A young woman in a gorgeous wedding dress, hunched over on the stone steps, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Outside the cathedral doors, he could hear angry voices demanding, "She's giving it all up. The merger, the family name, the ungrateful girl who doesn't know what's best for her." The bride looked up, and Jack saw something in her eyes. He recognized the same desperate look he'd seen in Sarah when the medical bills started piling up, when the world seemed too heavy to bear alone. "We have to help her," Ellie whispered, finding his small hand. "That's what superheroes do, right, Dad?" Jack hesitated. He had $17 in his bank account. His truck needed new brakes. Ellie's school shoes had holes he was patching with tape. The last thing they needed was getting involved in rich people's problems. But then the woman looked right at him, mascara smeared across her cheeks, and he saw something else. Pure, unbridled fear. Someone running from something, and all the instincts Sarah had taught him were there. A good man shouted that he couldn't leave. "Stay close to me, sweetheart," he told Ellie, then stepped forward. The bride's eyes widened as she realized someone was actually approaching her, not just watching from afar. Jack pulled a worn handkerchief from his pocket. "Sarah's handkerchief," he said quietly, his voice even and kind. "It's clean, and whatever's haunting you out there, you don't need to face it right now." She looked at the simple white fabric as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The moment Sophia Lane, though Jack still didn't know her name, reached for her handkerchief, the cathedral doors burst open like a dam. There she was, the runaway bride. A flood of people poured out of the cathedral, guests in suits costing thousands of dollars, photographers with flashbulbs, reporters thrusting microphones like weapons. The peaceful evening suddenly turned to chaos. Sophia Lane, why did you call off the wedding? Is it true you blew the merger deal? How does it feel to humiliate your family in front of the whole city?" Jack instinctively stepped between the crowd and the trembling woman behind him. Ellie clung to his leg, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Get away from her." A man in an expensive tuxedo pushed through the crowd. That was probably the groom, Jack realized, noticing the boutonniere hanging crookedly on his lapel. "She's having some kind of nervous breakdown. Sophia, get back inside right now." "No." Her voice was barely audible, but Jack heard the steely whisper beneath it. I won't." The photographer stepped too close, his camera flash blazing in her face. Smile at us, sweetheart, show us. $1 billion regret. That's when Jack had enough. He spread his arms wide, creating a barrier between Sophia and the hungry crowd. Step back. Can't you see she's upset? Laughter erupted immediately. Cruel, mocking sounds that sent shivers down Jack's spine. Oh, look at that. The woman in pearl jewelry pointed at Jack's work clothes with obvious disgust. Her knight in a shiny janitor's uniform. Does this mechanic really think he's saving a princess? He probably hopes she'll tip him for his efforts. A reporter with perfectly coiffed hair pointed a microphone at Jack's face. Sir, did you orchestrate this publicity stunt? How much is she paying you to play the hero? Jack's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice even. I'm not acting. She needed help. That's all. More cameras flashed. Jack was already imagining the headlines, the social media posts, how this moment would be distorted and ridiculed online. But when he looked at Sophia again, seeing the gratitude and desperation in her eyes, he knew he would make the same choice again. Dad, Ellie tugged at his shirt. Are these people evil? Some people. So when they're scared or confused? Jack asked, loud enough for the crowd to hear. But that doesn't mean it's right, the groom replied, pushing forward again. Sophia, stop this nonsense. Think about what you're throwing away. Think about your family's reputation. I think, Sophia stood up suddenly. Her voice was shaky, but strong. I think about how none of you asked me what I wanted. I think about how you planned my entire life without ever asking if I wanted to live it. You're hysterical, the groom barked. There's obviously stress, Sophia interrupted, her voice growing louder. It's from pretending to love a man I barely knew for the sake of a business deal disguised as a wedding. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Shock swept through the assembled guests, then chaos erupted again. Worse than before. She admits it was all a setup. The Lane family empire is crumbling. This is better than a soap opera. Jack saw Sophia begin to crumble under the increased attention. Her breathing became shallow. Panic was rising. Without thinking, he took off his jacket and draped it over his shoulders. He slung his arm over hers and carefully led her toward the alley he'd spotted earlier. This way, he murmured. There's a way out. As they threaded their way through the crowd, Jack heard every word of ridicule, every cruel comment about his appearance, his arrogance, his stupidity, but he also heard something else. Ellie's quiet, clear, and determined voice. My dad is the best dad in the world. He helps people because he's good, not because he wants money. You're all just mean. Several photographers trained their cameras on the 8-year-old girl, and Jack's protective instincts flared like fire. Don't touch the cameras, my daughter, he said. There was a warning in his voice that made even the most persistent reporters back off. They reached the entrance to the alley behind them. The crowd followed, but the narrow space slowed them down. Jack looked at Sophia, still wrapped in her jacket. Her mascara was smudged, but her eyes were clearer than they had been since all of this began. Can you walk a little further? He asked softly. There's a coffee shop about 3 blocks from here. You can catch your breath there. Sophia nodded, then looked at Ellie, who was holding their hands. Right now. Thank you. You both whispered. I don't even know your names, and you. I'm Jack. This is Ellie. I'm Sophia. She squeezed Ellie's hand. And I think your dad is a real-life superhero. As they walked away from the chaos, cameras still flashed behind them. Neither of them knew that in a few hours their faces would be all over the news and social media in the country. Would you help her or leave? Jack's apartment was far from cathedral-like grandeur. Paint was peeling in the corners, the sofa had seen better decades, and the kitchen table wobbled unless you knew exactly where to rest your elbow. But Sophia sat wrapped in Jack's jacket, a steaming mug of instant coffee warming her hands. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this safe. Sorry, it's a little, Jack said, stirring something that smelled divine in a battered pot on the stove. Macaroni and cheese is all I can whip up on short notice. It smells perfect, Sophia replied, and it was true. When was the last time someone actually cooked for her, not through catering or staff, but standing in the kitchen and making something with their own hands, because they? Ellie, not indifferent to what was happening, got out her art supplies and worked on a new drawing at the coffee table, her tongue hanging out in concentration. I'm drawing you without the ugly dress, she announced to Sophia. Daddy says clothes don't make the man, so I'm drawing your heart, Sophia said. She caught her breath. My heart, it's gold. Ellie said matter-of-factly. Because you were brave, running away from the evil people. Jack's phone vibrated on the table, then again, and then rang without stopping. He glanced at the screen and frowned. That's weird. I have, like, 20 missed calls. He picked up the phone, and Sophia watched as his expression changed from confusion to shock, then to something approaching fear. Jack, what happened? He turned the phone toward her, and she saw her face staring back at her from a news website. The headline made her cringe. Billionaire bride Sophia Lane missing since wedding. Last seen with mystery man. The article had already gone viral. Photos from the cathedral steps. Jack's protective stance. Ellie holding their hands. The comments section exploded with speculation, judgment, and worse. Jack's voice was barely audible. You're Sophia Lane, Lane Industries, the Lane Foundation. He slumped in his chair. Oh my God, what have I done? Sophia set down her mug, her hands shaking. I wanted to tell you. For an hour, I wanted to just be Sophia, not an heiress, not a company asset, not a merger bride, just me. Ellie looked up from her drawing. What's a billionaire? Someone with tons of money, honey? Jack asked, his mind clearly racing. Oh, Ellie shrugged and went back to her drawing. Dad, you always say money can't buy important things, so it doesn't matter, right? The wisdom of children. Sophia felt the tears welling up again, but they were different tears, tears of gratitude, of wonder. When was the last time she had met people who saw her first and foremost as a person? Jack's phone rang again. This time he answered, his face grim. Hello. Sophia watched as his expression grew darker with each word. When he hung up, his hands shaking. That was my boss, he said quietly. I got fired. Apparently, the garage got hundreds of calls today. I'm a kidnapper, a gold digger. I'm holding you hostage. His laugh was bitter. Mrs. Henderson from the next room called the police. They want to talk to me. It's my fault, Sophia whispered. I ruined your life. No, Jack replied firmly. You didn't do anything wrong, and neither did I. I helped someone who needed help. If this is a crime, then the world is more broken than I thought. At that moment, they heard sirens, car doors slamming, heavy footsteps on the stairs, a sharp thud, more like a battering ram. Police, open up. Jack squeezed Sophia's hand, then looked at Ellie. Calm down, darling. Everything will be fine. He opened the door and saw not only the police, but also a small army of officers, security guards in expensive suits, and a woman in a business dress who exuded authority and coldness. Mr. Turner, the officer in charge, told us we needed to speak with you about the whereabouts of Sophia Lane. I'm here, Sophia said, stepping out the door. And I came voluntarily, the woman replied. In a business dress, pushing past the police. Ms. Lane, I am Rebecca Stone, your family's head of security. Your father is in a panic. The board is holding an emergency meeting. Merger talks have collapsed. You need to go home immediately. I don't want to go home. Your wishes don't matter, Rebecca snapped. You have responsibilities, obligations. People depend on you. People have depended on me my whole life. Sophia's voice wavered. When can I depend on someone? When can I choose someone? The officer stepped forward. Mr. Turner, we have received reports that you may have coerced or influenced Ms. Lane's decision to call off the wedding. That's ridiculous, Sophia said. Before Jack could respond, he saved me. These people, she gestured at Rebecca and the security team, they are the ones who have coerced me my whole life. Jack felt the weight of every camera phone pointed at him through the window, every neighbor peeking under his door, every judgment passed on his character, his motives, his worth. For 3 years, he'd built a quiet, honest life with his daughter, and it was all falling apart because he'd tried to help someone. But then Ellie had walked up to him, her small hand sliding into his large one. My dad didn't steal anyone, she announced to the room full of adults. He just has a good heart, and if you can't see that, you need to get your eyes checked. A frozen moment came as Sophia looked around the room. The officers ready to arrest the man who had shown her kindness. Rebecca, who treated her like fugitive prey rather than a person. Ellie, protecting her father with the unwavering loyalty only children possess. Something had frozen in Sophia's mind for 27 years. She'd let other people make her choices, but not anymore. She stepped forward, took Jack's other hand, and turned to face the cameras that had somehow appeared in the hallway. My name is Sophia Lane, she said, her voice clear. And if anyone touches Jack Turner or suggests he's done anything wrong, every business deal, every merger, every contract my family has planned will be terminated immediately." The silence was deafening. "He saved me," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "When everyone else saw a story, a scandal, or a business opportunity, he saw a person in need. If that wasn't worth protecting, what was?" The information cycle moves fast, but not faster than the truth. Within 24 hours, the story had completely turned upside down. Cathedral security footage emerged, showing Jack's gentle approach, his protective posture, the way he shielded Sophia and Ellie from the aggressive mob. The audio recording captured his quiet words of comfort, Ellie's innocent defense of her father, and worst of all, the cruel laughter of the wedding guests who mocked a man for displaying basic human decency. From mechanic to hero, the single father who reminded us what kindness looks like. The headlines of every major news outlet. The garage owner who fired Jack was the first to call back. "Jack, I made a mistake. I was scared, all those angry calls. But I watched the news, and you have a job promotion coming your way." But it wasn't just his boss. Mrs. Henderson knocked on his door with tears in her eyes and a casserole in her hands. "Jack, honey, I'm so sorry. I thought, well, it doesn't matter. I thought I was wrong." The local diner where Jack sometimes took Ellie for breakfast on weekends had a new sign up. "Heroes eat free. Thank you, Jack Turner." Ellie was overjoyed. "Dad, no? Look, they published your picture in the paper, like a real superhero." The sweetest moment came when the film crew tracked down Marcus Wellington, Sophia's ex-fiancé. They found him at the country club, and his true colors immediately revealed themselves. "Of course, it's all about money," he said, adjusting his golf glove with obvious irritation. "Sophia never cared about love or duty. She's always been selfish. The merger would have made both our families billions, but she threw it all away for some fantasy of marrying for love," the interviewer insisted. "But don't you think she deserves the right to choose? Who will she marry?" Marcus laughed. "That sounds rude and arrogant. It's up to you. She's in her own lane. She doesn't choose, she inherits, and that comes with responsibility. If she can't handle that, perhaps she doesn't deserve the family fortune." The interview went viral for all the wrong reasons. Social media exploded with fury at Marcus's cold and calculating attitude. "Sophia deserves better." The phrase became a worldwide trend. Within days, his own family distanced themselves from him, embarrassed by his public display of greed and callousness. Meanwhile, Sophia worked quietly behind the scenes. She used her influence to monitor every cruel comment, every mocking post about Jack's appearance or social status. She ensured there were consequences. The photographer who called Jack his knight in shining janitor's attire found his credentials revoked at every major venue in the city. The socialite who mocked his work clothes found her memberships to 3 exclusive clubs mysteriously revoked. But the most touching moment came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Sophia showed up at Jack's garage just as he was finishing up the last of the renovations. She was dressed simply that day, jeans, a sweater, her hair pulled back into a ponytail, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked completely at peace. "I brought something for Ellie," she said, holding a small wrapped package. They walked together to the elementary school, where Ellie was taking an after-school art class. When the little girl saw Sophia, her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Sophia, are you here to see my new painting?" she asked. The drawing was beautiful. 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun, and the word family written in pencil beneath. Sophia unwrapped the gift. Inside was a professional drawing kit, colored pencils, pastels, watercolors, everything a young artist could dream of. "Every superhero's daughter deserves the best materials," Sophia said, kneeling down to Ellie's level. Ellie hugged her tightly. "Will you stay with us?" she asked. Sophia looked over Ellie's head at Jack. Her eyes mingled hope and uncertainty. 6 months later, Sophia Lane was a changed person. She had rebuilt her entire life, stepping away from her day job at Lane Industries to focus on foundational work that truly meant something to her. She moved out of the family mansion into a modest apartment just 3 blocks from Jack's house. Every morning, she stopped by the garage before heading to the foundation's office. Not because Jack needed the coffee she brought him, but because seeing him smile was the best part of her day. Today was special, even though it marked 6 months since what the media called the eloping wedding that changed everything. Jack was under the hood of the vintage Mustang when she arrived, and she couldn't help but smile at the sight of his battered boots sticking out from underneath the car. "Jack," she called softly, "I brought you something." He rolled out onto the sticky road. Grease smeared across his cheek. He grinned when he saw her. "You bring me something every day? My coffee addiction is entirely your fault, not the coffee today." She held out the small velvet box. Her hands trembled slightly. Jack suddenly sat up seriously. "Sophia, it's not what you think," she said quickly, then laughed at herself. "Well, maybe it is, but just open it." Inside the box was a handkerchief, but not just any handkerchief. This one was silk, pure white, with delicate embroidery along the edges. Embroidered in gold thread in the corner was a single word: hope. Jack's breath caught, and he gently ran his thumb over the embroidery. "Sophia, old hope fades," she said, echoing his words from months ago. "But hope must not fade. It must grow stronger." Jack stood, still holding the handkerchief, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. 6 months of shared dinners, exhibitions of Ellie's work, quiet conversations after Ellie fell asleep. 6 months of slowly, carefully falling in love with the deep certainty that comes from truly knowing someone. "I love you, Sophia," she whispered. "Not because you saved me from that wedding, but because you save me every day, just by being who you are." Jack gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't noticed. "I was broken when I met you, not from poverty or loss, but from forgetting that good things can still happen. You didn't just burst into my life, Sophia, you brought it back to life." When he kissed her, it felt like an eternity. Later that evening, as they sat on Jack's couch, Ellie between them, watching her work on her latest masterpiece, Jack reflected on how dramatically his world had changed. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" Ellie asked. Without looking up from his drawing, Jack, squeezing Sophia's hand, said, "Sometimes the best things in life are hidden beneath the scariest moments." Sophia smiled, leaning against his shoulder, and added, "Sometimes running away is really running towards something better." Subscribe if you believe true love is worth more than any fortune.